Okay, this is going to be the last video of the semester. You could view this as a summary of everything that we have discussed so far. Although the focus here is going to be more on the practical side rather than the theory side. I may touch upon certain theory side very briefly, but the focus primarily here will be on the practical side of what you can do. Even the practical side, I have touched upon many of these things before, but there will be certain new ideas as well here that I didn't have an opportunity to share with you before. In any case, if you incorporate these things into your life, you can live a stressless life. And and pay attention to what I'm saying. I'm saying stressless life, not stress-free life. Because stress-free, being completely free of stress probably is not even practical, not even possible. But more important than that, some amount of stress is good for us. We know this from the research from Hansel's time, how there is eustress, there is distress. If there is an optimum amount of stress in our lives, that's good. It enhances our performance. We don't want too much stress, and that leads to distress, disease, all that stuff. And why am I emphasizing so much on habits? Because just knowing certain techniques is not enough. In fact, I would say it's even useless. Why? Because unless I learn that technique and habitually practice it, it won't become part of myself. And till the point that it becomes part of myself, I won't get the benefits out of it, especially when there is a real need for it. Let me take a parallel example. Let's say I learned some cool martial arts move from my master. Okay, is that going to be enough? No. In fact, I won't be able to use it. I won't be able to think and use it during a real street fight situation if such a situation arises, right? But if I've been practicing, if I've been regularly practicing those moves, then it would become my part of myself itself, and involuntarily I would be able to use those appropriate moves to deal with the enemy in a street fight situation, right? Otherwise it's useless. So same with respect to meditation or the breathing techniques or anything else that I have taught you in this class. If you have been practicing those things on a regular basis, then you will be able to use it when there is a real need for it, when you are actually going through tremendous stress. Then you will be able to very easily go into that state of mindfulness, that state of meditativeness by engaging in those practices. Otherwise, you will not be able to engage in those practices. It won't come naturally to you. So you have to invest in yourself. You have to make yourself a project, okay, where you are trying to better yourself. And if you do that over a period of time, you will become much better than what you are now. Wherever you are now, we all are at different levels of development. But wherever you are now, if you consistently work on yourself over an extended period of time, you may not see immediate major differences in your life, but over a period of time, you will see you are way ahead than somebody who is not practicing those things on a regular basis. And when we invest in ourselves, it follows an exponential growth pattern. In other words, like compound interest as opposed to simple interest. You should all know what exponential growth is, especially now with the COVID-19 pandemic going on, right? So initial stages, it seemed like there was no major changes, happening in the number of infections. But then very fast the number of infections increases. In this graph we see about 1,000 infections But of course, we now know the number of infections in US has stopped. Some 500,000, more than 600,000, close to 700,000 now, right? So in just few days, it went so high. But initially, it didn't seem like it was increasing at that high a pace. So this is what happens in compound interest. Albert Einstein is often credited with this quote that compound interest is the greatest invention the world has produced. He was not referring to just compound interest of money, even though it will apply there, but compound interest about anything. He was essentially talking about exponential growth. When you invest into something that follows an exponential growth pattern, all you just need to do is consistently invest, consistently invest. Initially, it will seem like these habits, these investments are not making major difference. But even if the growth is 1%, over a period of time, if it is a compounded interest of 1%, your growth is going to be phenomenal. You will reach the kind of heights that others won't. So this is the thing to keep in mind when you are investing on yourself. And you should also keep in mind the fact, so here's a graph that shows the difference between simple interest growth and compound interest growth, right? So what do we see here? During the initial stages, there isn't much difference between the simple interest line or the compound interest line. They pretty much follow very close pattern. So if the rate of improvement is, let's say, 1% per day, or maybe even less than that, it may seem like, our actions, the habits that we are trying to build is making no difference to our lives, because we don't see any major difference. But we see that big difference a little after. So the important thing is to not get disheartened and continue to persist. That is the key thing to remember here. So we have a lot of memory of our actions not making any difference. Plus we have the memory of how much of hard work that we are putting in. But we are not seeing any major differences in our life. So only thing is to keep in mind is not get disheartened and continue to work hard, continue to persist in one's practices, and then we see those humongous differences in our lives. You have learned many things in my class that help with stress management. Can you answer this question? What is that one activity that's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck? If you said it is meditation, actually you are wrong. It's actually physical activity. Meditation is something that I will put in second. But physical activity, unlike meditation, this is much more easy. Plus, you see, our bodies were meant to be physically active all the time, except for the time that we are resting and sleeping. Otherwise, that's how our bodies were meant to be. For millions of years, if we talk in the evolutionary scheme of things, we were constantly active, either hunting or foraging for food, or later on farming. That was also a very physically taxing activity. Until just few decades, or you could say, sometimes couple of centuries, we had been very active individuals. That's how our bodies were made to always be active. And we feel happiest when our bodies are active, because that's how our bodies were made. But now what do we see? We are sedentary. That's how our jobs are. And a lot of our habits have also become that way. While, few hundred years ago, we were active throughout the day, and only when we got tired did we sat and relaxed a little bit. What do we see? We see just the opposite now. We are sitting on our butts the entire day. Only when we get tired do we stretch and walk around a little bit. Just the opposite. But that's not how our bodies were meant to function. In any case, The best thing that you can do to manage your stress is to exercise regularly. And I will elaborate that a little bit more now. You all know the benefits of exercise, especially the physical benefits. That is the reason I won't go through this list in detail here. Instead, I'm going to highlight the benefits that exercise has on our brain. In fact, most of the modern researchers say that exercise benefits our brain much more than the rest of the body. In fact, our brain benefits first, even before any of the rest of our body benefits from exercise, be it muscles, bones, or whatever. So, how does exercise benefit the brain and consequently helps better our stress management abilities? But let's first of all understand physical exercise from the stress model perspective that I have discussed so many times with you. What happens when we are exercising? We are consciously, out of our own volition, we are placing certain demands on our body, right? So let's say we are placing demands right here, but it's a self-chosen demand. And the more we work at this demand level, initially our capacity may not be too high for this, but after some time we get used to it. So progressively, as we start increasing the level of demand that we place on our body, along with that, our capacity also increases. So over a period of time, we tend to develop greater capacities. We can take even greater demands, which which is how ultimately we manage stress, right? So how does exercise affect our brain? Well, first of all, when we are exercising, we do see an increase in the stress hormones like the epinephrine and norepinephrine. But that's good. They help enhance our attention and perception. They help us get really focused. The endorphins help us not feel too much of pain. Again, that's how we would have survived during any fight or flight situations, right? But you may worry, if there are stress hormones, then it should be bad for us. But no. What happens when we are regularly stressed but sedentary? Our stress hormones stay in our body. They don't get that release. Especially remember cortisol, when it accumulates within us for long periods of time, it damages the hippocampus because it has a lot of those glucocorticoid receptors, which ultimately results in Cushing syndrome. So one way to deal with stress, even if I am feeling stressed right now, one of the easiest way to deal with it is, let me just go and work out. That can give me a release. That can actually make me feel immediately well. Okay. Of course, there is the aspect of developing the habit. I'm not even talking about that right now. If I'm not feeling well, if I'm feeling depressed and I go exercise, go for a run, I will start feeling better within few minutes of starting my exercise. Okay, so that's the important thing. But apart from norepinephrine and endorphin, there are certain other hormones, the feel-good hormones that are, endorphin is a feel-good hormone, but serotonin, you would remember, it's one of the happiness hormones, enhances our positive mood, it makes us feel relaxed, calm. Dopamine, again, that hormone, it's the reward hormone, as again I have mentioned, but more than reward hormone, it gets us motivated. So if we are feeling depressed, we don't feel much energy, but because of the increase in dopamine in our system, but in the right way, not in some addictive way. Here we have an increased level of dopamine in our body, but in the appropriate way. That actually gets us more motivated. It gets us want to learn and want to work hard. So, and there is another, the brain-derived neurotropic factor, uh, another neurotransmitter, which has uh, excellent positive benefits for the healing of our brain. So it repairs all the neurons, it prevents the brain from getting any degenerative diseases later in our lives. Uh, so if you want to stay healthy, keep your brain healthy, if you want to stay smart for long periods of time, you have to exercise. You may do nothing else. You don't have to necessarily work on creating, solving complex puzzles. You don't have to do that. The best thing that you can do to enhance the health of your brain and to, let's say, retain your IQ levels, whatever IQ levels that you have, is actually engage in physical exercise. When you're exercising, your brain gets a lot of blood flow, which actually provides your brain with all that necessary nutrients. And there's been a lot of studies that show that regular exercise increases the gray matter. In fact, there is development of new cells, neurogenesis, in certain areas of the brain, especially the hippocampus, again, which you would remember has tremendous roles when it comes to motivation, as well as converting our short-term memory into long-term memory. So hippocampus part of the brain, which is crucial for learning, for motivation, for our memory, plays a or benefits a lot from regular exercise. So is this all theoretical argument, or is there actual evidence for exercise working? Actually, there's a lot of evidence. Let's take an example here. This is a paper that was published in 2000. What did the researchers do? They divided people suffering from clinical depression into 3 random groups. One group was prescribed to engage in exercise. They had to exercise regularly. The second group was prescribed antidepressant medication. And the third group got combination of both. They were exercising as well as getting antidepressant medication. Which group recovered from depression? It was actually not the group that was getting medication. In fact, it was the group that was exercising. Close to 90% of the exercising group actually recovered from depression, compared to about 50% that was getting medication, and maybe about 60% that had combination of both. That's a huge difference, right? And here's something that is even more interesting. Relapse happens a lot, right? What do we see for, so this is the gray part of the graph, the relapse. The relapse rate amongst the group that was exercising is really low, some 6-7% for the exercise group, whereas it was close to 38-40% for the group that was getting medication, and some 30% that was getting combination of both medication and exercise. So this shows the power of exercise. It can be even more powerful than antidepressant medications when it comes to treating depression. Again, I'm not saying that you rely only on exercise and not consult a physician if you are suffering from clinical depression. No, I'm not recommending that. You should listen to your physician. What I'm saying is there is evidence of exercise being even more effective than antidepressants, at least with this group of patients here. Here's another example of how regular exercise and the consequent increase in fitness that comes from it enhances your performance. Schools all over the US have been struggling to increase the academic performance levels of students. You are aware of this, right? When they introduced exercise, regular exercise into the regimen, which increased their fitness levels, what do they find? They see that the performance of students on these different standardized academic tests actually increase. So clear evidence of how exercise can even enhance your performance. Again, you understand why? Because it enhances your mental clarity, you have better learning capacity, you have better memorization capacity. So naturally, you will be performing better. The first study that I shared of the effect of exercise on people suffering from depression, you could argue that's a small experimental study. The sample size was smaller there. But what about this study? You can see there's a huge sample size here, and it's a relatively recent paper, 2018 paper. The mental health burden is much lower amongst those who exercise regularly compared to those who don't. And it doesn't matter what kind of exercise you do. There are many different exercises that are covered here. And here we have the graph for overall all exercises. What do we see here? The mental health burden is decreasing when you exercise regularly. And the decrease is ideal when you exercise for about 45 minutes. This dotted line is 45 minutes. If you exercise for too long, let's say you exercise for 90 minutes, that can have certain other benefits, but it does place more mental health burden on you. And in certain sports more so than others. For example, water sports, winter sports, maybe being exposed to that cold for longer periods of time can put additional strain on you. The point here is that you don't have to exercise for 2 hours, 3 hours for excessively long periods of time. 30 to 45 minutes of exercise can help you reap the benefits that you get from exercise. And how frequently do you have to exercise to get those benefits? No, you don't have to exercise every day. Especially, if you are exercising every day and for long periods of time, then it is possible that you are a exercise addict. That's problematic, right? But we see about 14 to 18 days, 16 days is about the mean where we see major dip in the mental health burden. So if exercising every other day seems to be fine. But if you want to get even more benefits, then you probably could exercise, say, about 24 days a month. That's what? 6 days a week. So you should be giving yourself at least 1 day rest, is the idea that's coming out here. So what is the lesson here? Simple. You exercise regularly and engage in a variety of exercises. One benefit is that you won't get bored doing the same thing over and over again. But the other benefit is that there is a lower risk of you getting injured. If you are doing the same thing over and over again, there could be a repetitive injury there, right? Plus, when you are doing variety of exercises, you increase your capacity in multiple dimensions. When you are doing weight training, you are increasing your strength. When you are running or swimming or biking, you enhance your endurance. Then yoga, stretching, that enhances your flexibility. So you become better from a very holistic perspective. This reminds me, I don't know how many of you are familiar with David Goggins. He used to be an ex-Navy SEAL, and he's one of those ultra athletes. He developed certain serious problems, serious injuries because of his repetitive injury. And even though he had broken many world records, later on he was not even having the energy to lift himself up from the bed. And he thought that he was dying. None of the doctors could fix things. And it turned out that at one point of time he was doing excessive strength exercise, and another later on he was doing just excessive endurance exercises, but he wasn't ever doing enough of flexibility exercises. So one of the trainers, one of the Navy trainers told him that, hey, you should be doing more of the yoga, the flexibility kind of exercises. And that's what ultimately saved his life. And then once he incorporated that stretching, that those yoga, those stretching exercises into his regimen, he got back his physical fitness back, and then he could go back to the elite running circuit and then again beat those records all over again. The book is called Can't Hurt Me. It's an excellent book that I would recommend if you are looking for books to read. Now let's take a look at the obesity prevalence in different countries across the world. United States unfortunately has the highest obesity rates, both among males and females. This is 2015 data. If we look at the most recent data, it's going to be even worse. Now, researchers have studied this. Like India has much lower obesity rate. I am mentioning because that's where I'm originally from. In any case, United States and people in India, they have different dietary habits. But researchers compared United States with France. France has much lower obesity rate here compared to United States. In terms of dietary habits, they tend to eat pretty much same things. They have pretty much similar eating habits. That's what the researchers find. Then why do they have dramatically different obesity levels? It turned out that in France, even if people aren't necessarily eating different, but they walk around a lot. They don't necessarily go to the gym and do engage in heavy workout, but the lifestyle is such, even for getting grocery or doing some errands, they walk. And they don't have elevators. Many of the buildings that they live in, 3 or 4 storied buildings, they do take those stairs. And that constant physical or periodic physical activity throughout the day is what then helped them not get obese. In contrast, what do we see in the United States? Even if we have to go half a mile, we drive. Our lifestyle is structured such a way, and even the roads are such that we end up being too dependent on our cars. And that is the reason we don't get enough movement. So this comes back to what I was emphasizing before. You don't even have to engage in a lot of vigorous exercise. If you do, that's great. But the important thing is to move on a regular basis. What I do, for instance, many of you already know, I have a desk cycle underneath my table in my office. But even then, periodically after having worked for a certain time, I just walk around on the campus for a little bit and then come back. It enhances my focus. I perform better. Now, this may or may not be feasible in the work that you are doing at your workplace. But if it is possible, then you should take those periodic breaks, move around. That is actually going to enhance your productivity. That is going to enhance your mental clarity. And it's much better to be active throughout the day as opposed to just exercise 15 minutes or half an hour in the morning and the rest of the day we are just sitting and lazing. Lazing does not necessarily mean that we are wasting time. I'm saying we may be working, but just sitting on our chairs, it will not be helpful. So that's the last thing that I wanted to point out in context of physical activity. The next big advice that I will give you is to never multitask. As much as possible, do not multitask. Okay. This is in a way similar to the meditation topic that we have discussed at extended length before. Meditation helps you focus. So meditation is great. In fact, I'm telling you that that's the second best thing that you can do to enhance your capacity to deal with the stresses of life. But the other side of it is also just not engage in multitasking. That's even more easy. Why? Because multitasking is not efficient. It is not effective. There's a lot of research papers that have been done on this. And they find conclusively that multitasking takes up a lot of your resources. In fact, multitasking is a myth. It's an illusion. We think that we are multitasking. We actually aren't. What happens? We may be engaged in our work and then we switch to a different task, and we have to make that switch and we have to reorient to that different task. And then when we come back to the original work, we have to switch again and reorient again. So that takes up a lot. The switching and reorienting takes up a lot of our mental resources. We may do this primary work and switching and reswitching very quickly. Like for instance, some of you who may have the habit of checking your messages while driving, you may do that switching and reswitching very quickly. Still, it is not multitasking. It is singular tasking, but happening in quick successions. And that takes up a lot of your resources. Let's say you are working on a paper and you thought, hey, I need to check whether I got that message that I was expecting from my friend. So you pick up the phone and see if the message has come. Let's even assume that there is no message. You put it back and then go back to writing your paper. How much time did you lose? 5 seconds? 10 seconds? Actually, no, much more. The actual time that you may have spent checking the phone and coming back to your work may have been 5 seconds or 10 seconds, but practically you may have actually lost 2 minutes or sometimes even more, because there's a lot of thought process that goes even before you check your cell phone, before you make that switch. You have to, you are not, before you make that switch, you are not thinking about your primary work anymore. Your thought has shifted to whether or not you got that message. And then it takes a little bit of time to reorient, and then, okay, you check the message. And then again, it's not that you immediately succeed in switching back to your work. Actually, why hasn't that friend messaged me? There could be all kinds of thoughts that may still stay in your mind for a certain amount of time. So it takes time for you to reorient back to your primary task. So the suggestion is that as much as possible, you should be working focused for the entire period that you're working. Set a time that you need to work, and for that particular time, without any distraction, you work. That's the commitment that you make. Again, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but there is research showing that when you multitask, your cortisol levels, your stress hormone cortisol that you're already aware of, that increases. Multitasking almost has a fight or flight kind of response on your body. So your adrenaline increases, creates that mental fog as opposed to the mental clarity that we were talking about earlier in this video. And why do you typically engage in multitasking? Because it gives you a high, or when you see a message, or when you get a like. So it's what is called dopamine addiction. Dopamine is a good hormone, but it can be a problematic hormone if it is motivating you towards such activities that is not helpful in your growth. You literally become addicted to dopamine, and you have difficulty concentrating focused for extended periods of time. They find that and essentially what's happening when you're multitasking is your limbic system hijacking your prefrontal cortex. That's exactly what's happening. So because of that, researchers do find people who multitask on a regular basis, their brain density, their gray cells in the anterior cingulate cortex actually decreases. Okay, so in contrast to exercise where we saw gray matter increasing, here what we see gray matter decreasing. So that's not good, right? So as much as possible, again, avoid multitasking. And don't fool yourself that you are good at multitasking. No one is good at multitasking. In fact, those who believe that they are good at multitasking end up being much worse at multitasking than those who believe that they are not good at multitasking. So multitasking is a myth, and it takes up a lot of your mental resources, and over a long period of time, it has a lot of detrimental effects on you. It reduces your capacity to deal with the challenges that you have. So simply avoid multitasking. Here's a summary of research on multitasking. What do we see here? Performance degrades when you multitask in majority of the cases. There's few exceptional cases where we see no effect, neither positive or negative effect. And a real small minuscule percentage where performance actually improved because of multitasking, which could be just an artifact because the effect size is so small there. But in the majority of the cases, the performance decreased when people multitask. Here's some more research on the horrible effects of multitasking. This was done by Glenn Wilson at the HP headquarters in London. Hewlett Packard, you know that company. They find that when people are multitasking, their performance decreased similar to a decrease of IQ in 15 points. That is full one standard deviation. In fact, if you have just exact average IQ of 100, let's say, decrease of one standard deviation 15 points means that you end up falling into the intellectual disability category. That's the level of decrease that we see here. They say that it was similar to smoking marijuana or staying up all night. That's the level of drop that they see when people are multitasking. Similar studies have been done at UC Irvine, for instance, and they find that when in the office people are switching back and forth, they, on an average, they take about 25 minutes to return to the original task. That can't be effective, right? We think that we will just check our I don't know, Instagram for a minute and then we'll get back to work. That minute becomes 10, it often becomes 20, 25. So always decide on the amount of time that you want to focus on and push yourself to stay focused for that period of time instead of constantly switching back and forth. In fact, there is a technique called the Pomodoro Technique that I will quickly mention in the next slide. So what's the Pomodoro Technique? It's a technique that was developed by Francesca Cirillo, and Pomodoro essentially is Italian for the word tomato. What is the technique? It's simple and straightforward. You set up a timer for 25 minutes. Especially you may not have had the practice of focusing for long periods of time. So 25 minutes is not too short, not too long. 25 minutes is considered ideal. Okay, so you set up a timer for 25 minutes, and of course you first of all decide what task you will be working on for that 25 minutes, and for the next 25 minutes until the timer goes off, you stay focused. Whatever comes in your way, you do not get distracted. You stay focused and work for those 25 minutes. After the timer goes off, then you take a 5-minute break. And that break, again, remember, ideally should not be checking your social media. It could be better taking a walk or maybe having a short chat sometimes occasionally. But the chat is better done on the longer break. So if you repeat this 25 minutes 4 times, then you can take a longer break of 15 minutes. But that's how this process works. When you're working, you should be working fully focused without any distraction. That is the basic idea. Simple, straightforward, but turns out to be a very effective way of reducing multitasking and thereby enhancing our productivity. One of the most common causes of stress in our lives is actually unfinished work, unfinished important work. We know that we should have been working on this particular project and we should finish it, but we haven't finished it. And that actually keeps bugging us. So if you want to reduce stress in your lives, have complete clarity on what it is that you need to do and do it, finish it. That will make your life much more easy. A really good book that explains this well is called Eat That Frog by Brian Tracy. It's a pop psychology kind of book, but the suggestions that Tracy is making here is rooted in research. In fact, he takes inspiration, by the way, of Eat That Frog from Mark Twain's quote, who said, eat a live frog first thing in the morning, and nothing worse will happen to you the rest of the day. Of course, he's not literally meaning eating a live frog, right? That's metaphorical. So whatever it is that you're dreading the most, that big assignment, that big project that you need to work on, we tend to avoid because we are worried whether we will be able to do a good job on it. We tend to avoid the thing that is most important. We tend to avoid those things the most, and that keeps bugging us even more. That's a major cause of stress in our life. So whatever it is that you are dreading the most, eat that thing first. Eat meaning do that thing first. Once you get up in the morning, do that thing first. It could be exercise for you, it could be writing for you, it could be whatever it is. I don't know what that thing is for you. It should be something important for you as well as something that you find very difficult or potentially stressful. So if you finish that off, then the rest of the day becomes much better. Even if you don't finish it, let's assume that you couldn't finish it because you had only 2 hours in the morning and that wasn't enough time for you to complete that task. But what happens? Because your mind was fresh after having had the night's rest, you will be much more productive and you will make much more improvements on that task if you worked after a restful night's sleep. Your progress is going to be much better than you procrastinating and leaving it for the rest of the day, for later in the day. What will typically happen then is your energy levels would have gone down after having worked on different tasks during the day, or after being distracted. When we get distracted, even when we are just checking things on Facebook or browsing the internet, that takes up a lot of our mental resources. And when we then actually go to doing the work, we do not have that much of our mental resources left. So it becomes even more difficult to get that work done. So this is again a great suggestion. Of course, if you do implement it in your life, and that is do the worst thing first. Now, I'm not saying that you should never procrastinate. Procrastination can actually be good. Not all procrastination is bad. The kind of procrastination that is bad is called passive procrastination. And the easy way to understand it is that it is emotionally motivated. What do I mean by that? You don't do what you are supposed to do because you don't feel like working right now. So you postpone it for a later time. It's emotion focused, right? It's not a conscious choice. It's not a rational choice that you're making. So you don't feel like it, so okay, I will do it later. But then you realize there will be greater scarcity of time later on. You may not feel good later on, plus you get closer to the deadlines, all that problems come up. Yeah, by the way, the emotion focused coping could also happen in form of a temptation. It's not just about not feeling like doing the work, but it's sometimes about feeling like doing something else. This is something that is important. Working on your project is important, but you feel like watching this TV show that is supposed to come right now. So again, this is emotion focused. It's you want to do something else. So you procrastinate, you postpone it for later, and that's of course then it stays in our mind. We don't actually ever succeed in procrastinating at a mental level. We succeed in procrastinating at a physical level. We may not do that activity, but that burden of not having done that activity still stays in our mind. So that enhances our stress, first of all, which I have already mentioned. Plus, it reduces the probability that we'll be able to do the job well and on time later on because of scarcity of time that may come in later on because of other demands that may come into place. But again, as I was saying, not all procrastination is bad. There is something called active procrastination that is good. And This is what we call is not emotion focused but problem focused. It's about making a very conscious choice about, hey, I'm not going to do this task right now. I will do this later. I sometimes do this problem focused coping, especially in context of emails. I know if I look at my emails, that will take up a lot of my time. I typically postpone it. It's a conscious choice to do it later part of the day. Morning part, something that takes up much more of my mental energy, like writing a research paper or working on a book. That's where I put in a lot of my investments, my energy investments. So you see, this becomes an active form of procrastination. Deliberately, you are not prioritizing certain tasks instead of the passive form, which is bad. So you can actually procrastinate in a very deliberative fashion, in a very active, conscious fashion, if you want to be more productive, if you want to be less stressed. Here's an analogy that will help you understand what I was explaining better. If I gave you this task, you have to fill in all this sand that you see here and the pebbles and the big stones, everything into this jar. How will you do that? Will you fill in the sand first, then the pebbles, and then the stone? That won't work because the sand will take up a lot of space and then there won't be enough space left for those bigger rocks. The correct answer, which many of you probably already know, is that you put in the rocks, the big rocks first, then the pebbles, because the pebbles will fit into the spaces between the rocks, and then you put the sand, right, which will fit into the spaces created between the pebbles and the rocks, and that way you can fit in everything. In fact, you can fit in even more. If you can pour water, which will fit into the spaces between the sand and everything, right? So this is the jar is the metaphorical 24 hours. If you do the big things, the most important things first, or even the most difficult things first, consciously and deliberately procrastinate the unimportant things or things that don't take up or don't demand a lot of your mental resources for later, you will actually be able to fit those things also into your 24 hours metaphorical jar, right? But if you do those unimportant things first, like going over your Instagram or your messages and all these unimportant things first, that is like filling the sand first, then that will take up most of your energy and you won't have the energy and resources to fit in the more important tasks within that 24-hour schedule. So that is the thing to keep in mind. This 2x2 matrix that you see is from a book by Stephen Covey. The book's title was Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It's an excellent book. It's again, pop psychology kind of book, but has some excellent ideas. So in here, he says that there are broadly two categories of tasks. Tasks that can be classified under the importance dimension. Some tasks are highly important, some are not important. And we are talking about important in terms of those activities being relevant to our personal goals, something that we want to achieve, something that's going to help in our personal growth. And then there are activities or tasks that are urgent. Sometimes we implicitly assume that anything that is urgent is important, but that need not be the case, right? Tasks may be highly urgent or not urgent. Some of the tasks may be urgent but not important, right? Your telephone rings or somebody interrupts, so you have to attend to this person. So it was urgent, you had to attend to this person, but that discussion or that telephone may be something very trivial that may not have anything to do with your own personal development, own personal growth, right? So we should not first of all assume that anything that is urgent is important. We should consciously put effort to figure out what are the important tasks in our life, and we should then engage in those tasks. But what often happens, we usually spend a lot of time, yes, on important tasks, but some tasks that are also high on urgency. Because they have become urgent, we have to spend our time there, right? And they are also important. But the thing is that they take up a lot of our mental resources, energy resources. It's like firefighting. It drains you out. Anything that is urgent and you have to work hard on it, it elevates your stress responses, your fight or flight responses. So what happens after doing so much of firefighting in quadrant 1? You shift to quadrant 4. You are tired. You end up just wasting time, let's say watching some stupid show on television or whatever. You engage in escape routines, which is not helping in your growth. So ideally, what is recommended is that you should be focusing your attention as much as possible. By the way, this may take some time for you to develop, especially if you have too many tasks in this quadrant 1. But gradually, you need to increase the time that you're spending in quadrant 3. These are tasks that are important, right? But not urgent. Important in your growth, but they are not urgent. So what happens is that it helps you get better. Like exercising, like meditation. These will all be activities that would go into important but not urgent. If you don't meditate today, the world is not going to fall over. You will still be living. Everyone is going to be fine. If you don't exercise today, nothing major problem is going to happen. So these are tasks that are important for your growth, for your development, but they are not urgent. And that is one of the reasons why we often skip this task. We think that, okay, I will do it from tomorrow. But the thing is that if you succeed in doing all the tasks that fall under this category, you will first of all have a lesser need to invest time on this high importance, high urgency quadrant. You will finish many of those tasks even before they become urgent. And one more point is, because you are working on it before they are becoming urgent, you will not be as stressed. So you will have a lesser need to engage in tasks that are wasteful because they are neither important nor urgent. So this is another thing that you could keep in mind that is going to help you in big way when it comes to managing your time. And more than managing time, I would say it's about managing your energy and ultimately being productive. The last principle that I want to touch upon in this video is the 80-20 rule. Because again, this is a great rule that if you succeed in understanding and internalizing and applying it well, can enhance your productivity in significant ways. It is also known as the Pareto principle because it was discovered first time by Vilfredo Pareto, who was an Italian, and he noticed that 80% of the land in Italy was owned by only 20% of the population. And later on, similar patterns was observed even in other things. 20% of the population has 80% of the wealth. 20% of the beer drinkers may consume 80% of the beer. Okay. In your home or in your office, 20% of the carpet area may get 80% of the wear. Only 20% of your customers may give 80% of the company sales or revenue. Only 20% of your customers may have 80% of the complaints. And if we talk about the other side, 80% of your healthcare costs may come from 20% of the people. Or 80% of the software bugs may be coming from only 20% of the programmers. Okay, so it can work both in the positive as well as in the negative direction. By the way, one point, it doesn't exactly have to be 80%, 20%. It could be 90-10. It could be 95-5. It could be even 99-1, based on the situation, based on the domain. That ratio may vary. But the important thing to keep in mind is that it is not a linear kind of relationship that we are seeing. Instead, in other words, everyone is not producing equally, or another way of, or not all our activities give equal amount of benefits to us. So we should have good clarity about what part of our work gives maximum returns. And if we analyze it well, we will find that that may be about 10-20% of our work time. And that is what is enhancing our productivity, our income, is contributing to 80% of the income or wealth. So if we figure that out, then we can be more strategic in our thinking, in the way that we invest our time. So that's the key thing to remember. Okay, so if you are a lazy person, figure out that 20% of the work that gives you 80% of the value. Okay, but if you are a stupid person, you will be spending 80% of your time on that work that gives very little value, only 20% of the value. Again, I'm not saying be lazy, right? Because if you are a lazy but also smart, then you will be investing time on that work that gives you the maximum value. So again, it's all about being conscious, being similar to the point that I had mentioned before. You doing a conscious procrastination versus emotional procrastination. Similar kind of issue here. You make a conscious choice about what brings in maximum value, and that's where you invest your time in. You don't have to be doing all kinds of stuff, everything, working on everything. That is similar to multitasking. That will drain you out, that will stress you out. So anyway, that's all that I had in terms of some of the things that you can readily incorporate in your lives. And these are not major things. These are minor things if you have to work on it on a regular basis. But if you do incorporate it, it doesn't have to be everything on one day. Slowly and steadily, you incorporate these things into your lives, and you will be much more productive, much less stressed. And there are many other things that you have already learned in the semester. I don't want to re-emphasize those things, but hope you find all these things helpful.